The Fruit of Grisaia is a beloved game among visual novel fans, known for its weird, wacky comedy and absolutely lovable heroines. 5 fan-favorite best girls that are also horribly damaged. For as much as this visual novel trilogy is a silly rom-com full of fun, idiotic antics and passionate, emotional romantic scenes, it sure doesn't hold back on being a serious psychological drama with depressing backstories. Hi, my name is August, and this is my coverage of the Grisaia trilogy, the eroge equivalent of everyone's favorite type of anime romance story. Don't worry, I can fix her. Teenage John Wick Mercenary Enrollment Edition. Enter Yuji Kazumi, a young teenager who wants to live an ordinary high school life. He transfers into Mihama Academy, an isolated school holding 5 female students, each one eccentric and extraordinary in their own right. One even tries to kill him. As Yuji gets closer to these girls, he becomes more involved with their unfortunate circumstances regarding their enrollment, as he also attempts to find meaning to his own life as an aimless Black Ops hitman. Now, when people think of Grisaia, they will definitely think of the crazy, weird antics that happen in here, followed by seeing people proudly repping whichever heroine they see as best girl. We have Amane, the proud big sister caretaker, Makina, the loud, rambunctious goofball, Sachi, the dutiful maid class rep, Yumiko, the aloof yet hostile loner, and Michiru, the lovable yet unmistakably stupid mood maker. That last one has the most devout fans, the same ones that will have my head on a pike if I said anything bad about her. All of them are odd, strange, and weird, each with their own abnormal quirks. Amane's sultry and slutty, Sachi wholeheartedly fulfills any order given to her, and Michiru's a tsundere, for some examples. Grisaia just takes those and runs with it. Their ultra-specific personality trait serves as the foundation for whatever off-kiltered comedy skit they're doing that day. Everyone is enough of an oddball that no one is an exception in being the idiot of the day, although Michiru tends to be the victim in most cases.
朝ですよ。Well, 若ユージ。例のものは？例のものは？例のものは？例のものは？いた！いた！
Grisaia is known for its comedy scenes, even infamously known due to its long-ass common routes. A prime example of I swear the visual novel slice of life scenes are important, but in Grisaia's case, the comedy is the content, only highlighted even more when it becomes terribly depressing later on. Game be like, enjoy the mischief while you can, you'll greatly miss it when it's gone.
Are you okay? Are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. Oh jeez, you too? Suck, you bastard!
Adding Yuji in the mix only increases the chaos. Like, the dude is this super serious military soldier, and you throw him into a den of adolescent schoolgirls. Of course, he's facing down a hellish battlefield even God fears. But it isn't long until he himself too reveals his own peculiar traits, either by making problems even worse, or by constantly yapping Vietnam guerrilla warfare tactics. Yuji will often give these life lesson introduction monologues about the importance of consistency of running 10 miles a day, only for the scene to be about baseball or something. What I will criticize though is that Yuji tends to be crudely mean to the girls. Dude's comments are direct and blunt with a seasoning of misogyny mixed in. You could argue that his harsh bias towards women is baked in his military-oriented background, but even so, there's some pretty sharp jabs in here that I'm like, damn dude, who raised you? And yet, despite the teasing and mischief the cast do on each other, they deeply care for and are willing to support each other as shared brethren with troublesome pasts. They know that everyone's in this school for something, but they keep their distance not to intrude. It's only when Yuji arrives that things start to change for the girls. Grisaia is a romance that features routes for every pairing, but I see it more as Yuji saving, well, more accurately, helping these girls overcome their psychological hangups and traumas while occasionally beating up a couple of goons. You'll really feel that drastic tone shift when something is very much wrong. Like when the silly energetic one starts vague monologuing philosophical life concepts out of nowhere. Michiru Matsushima, the self-proclaimed tsundere that arguably has the biggest mental problems and saddest life story out of the bunch. Now, extremely hot take here, Michiru's one of my least favorite girls in the whole Grisaia cast. Cue the Riot and Michiru fans yelling from my head. I think Michiru, the person we see constantly at the beginning, is just too much of a loudmouth idiot for my personal taste. However, I was not expecting for this happy-go-lucky airheaded girl to have gone through stuff. Grisaia gets really deep into detailing the horrible lives these girls lived through, the scarring incident, the after effects of the event, and every reaction, every feeling, every transformation expressed through all of that. When I first read this, I was like, wow, this is completely f***ed up. You poor girl, let me give you a hug. And then I remembered there were 4 other girls in here and realized that this late game was going to be miserable. Michiru's route is the most drama intensive and character focused out of all of them. She is put through the emotional ringer. Every bad thing that happened to her constructs and reinforces her negative beliefs, and every act of coping is just her putting a bandage on an even graver wound. Teasing Michiru might have been fun earlier, but here her route is nasty with the reveals. Michiru having a very bad time in here is an understatement. But how she, with the help of Yuji, digs herself out of her situation is what really sells her route. It's one of my favorites in here. However, Michiru's route points out a particular flaw I had with the Fruit of Grisaia as a whole. Because if you really pay attention, the romance tends to be pretty bare bones in some parts. A majority of the time is dedicated towards resolving the ongoing problem and healing the heroine's mental state that we barely see any of the cute, wholesome romantic moments. Granted, the big problem should be resolved first, but I don't agree with Grisaia's ways of disguising Yuji's "I can fix what's wrong with her" as romantic development. Sure, we get a cute date scene here and there and maybe an H scene thrown in as the cherry on top, but I can't exactly enjoy a cute outing if the couple are also running away from their problems. Mentally and quite literally, this is like the plot of half of the heroines in here. That said, imagine my surprise when Michiru, after everything, turns out to be super freaking adorable. Michiru may not be top of my rankings, but her romance scenes are cute and endearing as hell. Even if her attempts aren't exactly well adjusted, the girl's got some spirit, and I got more of that in The Labyrinth of Grisaia. The next game in the trilogy solves that problem I had, and I'll get to that much later, but Fruit needs reading first to really understand the impact of those traumatic events. It honestly makes sense why Michiru acts the way she does, or in fact, all of the girls. Their quirky habits and personalities are used for comedy value, yes, but you can also see it as behavioral after effects of the horrible events that happen in their lives. So horrible that Grisaia shows that these girls took what they learned from their incidents and then drastically overcorrected to protect themselves. I can't think of anyone else that applies to more than our super polite maid, dutiful, hardworking woman, Sachi Komine. Arguably the visual novel medium's most iconic maid heroine. The girl is just that dedicated to the job, with her only request for reward being a humble pat to the head. Not gonna lie, a part of me went into her route thinking I was going to read nothing but praise kink sex. It's not, but a good girl has to be rewarded every now and then, and yet corrections also have to be administered. The girl is just a bit too obedient. That horrifying moment when everyone stops and says, no, that's not normal. So it's up to Yuji to help the poor girl come to her senses. What's important is that while Yuji plays a notable role in helping the girls with their mental hangups, even going as far as to roleplay as the people they want, master, younger brother, papa, bodyguard, and even gravedigger, ultimately, the girls need to resolve the issues by themselves. They personally need to come to terms with their own problems to move forward. Some routes do this pretty well, others I feel are slightly worse, but it still attempts the effort to a decent degree. I say this because the Fruit of Grisaia's quality differs between each route due to most of the heroines being written by a different author. Regardless, the overall direction is still the same: Misfit Girl Monogatari. I find Sachi and her route pretty special in how correcting her overtuned personality naturally just makes her extremely cute in the end. It's these small changes with her that I found made the biggest impact. The neurons in my brain firing when Sachi wears normal clothes. Maid uniforms are an endearing character outfit, but it doesn't mean it has to be on all the time. Yes, the casual clothes stays on during sex, damn it. I very much like Sachi's route. It was kinda fire. She, just in general, is sweet to Yuji from beginning to end, compared to the woman who tried to kill him at first glance. Introducing Yumiko Sasaki, a cold, rigid, and distant woman. A girl who keeps strangers away with her hostile and sharpened blades of words and steel. Someone who oddly bears resemblance to another purple-haired woman who wields box cutters, who is also designed by Akio Watanabe. I can't think of the name, but I bet they have a pretty good voice actor. Yumiko's route plays it honestly incredibly straight, and by that I mean I feel like I was watching an East Asian drama with their oddly familiar romance tropes. I mean, what better way to grow the enemies to lovers bond, or correction, one-sided enemy to lovers, then forced proximity, from having a classic type of antagonist to outrageously wacky situations connecting the two. I'm still in shock over some of the things that Yuji does in here. Like, how is he standing like that? Yes, they may feel super cliche, only dialed up to an 11 with anime absurdity, but I had a blast here. I am an absolute sucker for these plot developments and tropes. The cold, distant love interest slowly warming up to the main protagonist never fails. So even if Yumiko's route played exactly how you would expect it to, with no further critical analysis needed, I sure as hell enjoyed the ride. I do find it incredibly funny that the anime ending to Yumiko's route was drastically different. Amusingly laughable so. There's other criticisms I have about the anime, like the fact that out of a 12-episode anime adaptation, both Yumiko's and Sachi's route were 1 episode each, but then again, the anime kinda did its own thing with anime original segments like Yumiko's and Amane's endings. Do I think the Fruit of Grisaia anime adaptations are worth watching? It doesn't adapt everything, really only fulfilling the bare minimum, but I've had an okay time with it. Although, out of all of my opinions about the anime, it sure wasn't going to save my final thoughts about Makina Irisu. Makina's my least favorite heroine out of the bunch, but once I got used to the uncomfortable Papa roleplay hours later, it wasn't that bad. Verdict is still out on whether or not the nickname change from Oni-chan to Papa was an upgrade or a downgrade. Makina looks, sounds, and is very much a immature brat, but this girl's got some hidden gifted potential. Regardless of how I personally feel about Makina, there's some strong setup in Yuji and Makina's dynamic. Makina slowly learning how to become stronger and more independent, and Yuji trying to figure out how to help the poor girl, as his master did for him. I argue that her route is very similar to Yumiko, but strangely her route is unique specifically because we get Yuji backstory development here, something that is oddly absent from everywhere else in the Fruit of Grisaia. I like how we get a lot more insight into Yuji's honestly messed up mental state given his past history. Although a part of me was wondering, should we really trust the person with the most sketchiest backstory to take care of another person, much less teach him the tricks of the trade? Apparently yes. No matter how Makina's route ended up, it was always going to feel bittersweet in the end. The good ending anyway. The bad ending is just majorly f***ed up. Perhaps it was a given from the premise and Yuji's occupation, but Makina's situation was always going to be complicated to handle. Her situation is up there for being the darkest in here, and yet it's not horribly brutal compared to Amane's. Amane Suo is basically the perfect wife. S-class in all parameters, top-tier figure, lovable Onesan charisma, master culinary chef, and a down-dirty pervert. The dream woman, basically. Amane is the only heroine in the cast which I feel has the strongest ties to Yuji and makes the most legitimate sense as a fated romantic pairing between the two. Given the chance, she will throw herself on top of Yuji without a second thought, much to the latter's disdain. Should have been me. Imagine my unsurprised shock when the most outwardly slutty girl has 2 times the amount of H scenes compared to the rest of the girls. For originally being an eroge with 18+ content, Grisaia works perfectly fine as an all ages title. In the all ages Steam and console port, the 18+ portions are substituted for more appropriately adapted scenes. But the reason why I'm saying this now is because reading Amane's route after patching the Steam version with the 18+ patch felt like a Nukige with story relevant padding for the first half. Amane is truly an overcompensating soul, and it so makes sense. Out of all of the girls, Amane's backstory is the most harrowing one. I thought the others were bad, but the phrase angelic how is a memorable, iconic subtitle because of how bad things went down in there. Amane's backstory is long, and it is depressing to sit through. The only saving grace keeping me from closing this game from how miserable I felt was the appearance of the undisputed Go Genius Woman X extraordinary Brocon herself, Grisaia's unofficial mascot heroine, Kazuki. Kazuki had so much dominating main heroine energy that she's only mentioned in Amane's route because the story had to outright nerf her. It's because of her influence that ultimately helped shape Amane into the type of person she is, in a very similar fashion to Yuji. Lots of bonding and mental health improvement happens between the two because of this shared emotional connection, especially after the main conflict in their route. But again, I really wish that there were more romantic scenes. Past the comedic antics, which arguably is the best and most entertaining part of the VN, the story is dedicated to telling its psychological drama about the girls. Don't get me wrong, it does a fine enough job, but I'm not fully satisfied because the romantic elements is undercut by the problems and resolutions surrounding the main conflict. And Yuji himself is lacking focus too, which is why the second installment, The Labyrinth of Grisaia, is so important. It's also my personal favorite of the trilogy. Now, The Labyrinth of Grisaia consists of a couple of features: after stories for all the heroines, short comedic stories, the Cocoon of Caprice, and if you have the 18+ patch, Professor Dave's masturbation station. This is still an eroge after all. Let's start with the after stories and how much I love them, for basically solving my problems in the heroine routes in Fruit. Again, I argued that the romance is pretty bare bones due to shifting the focus towards solving the heroine's problems. Far less of the cute romantic bits between the couple. The after stories are basically that, while also showcasing the heroine's post-development. Mitsuru's was super wholesome, Yumiko's is heartwarming, Asachi becomes the ultimate powerhouse wife, Makina doubles down on her decisions she made in her route, and Amane's actions feel way more genuine here. It is the wholesome dosage I needed before dunking myself into the man of misery himself, Yuji Kazumi. The Cocoon of Caprice is chronologically the next part of the story, the Grand Route, in which Yuji helps out all of the heroines with their problems, but doesn't pursue a romantic relationship with them. This scenario also clears up the other problem I had with Fruit, in which Yuji never actually gets properly fleshed out. Yeah, sure, he transforms into a better, determined person at the end of the routes thanks to the girls, but there's no details about how he first became the person who arrived at Mihama Academy, besides the casual mentions of his master and his sister. The Cocoon of Caprice is showing exactly how he turned out this way, for worse and for the better. Because for every much of a positive influence the people he met were, you could equally make the argument that them up in other ways too. So let's start off with the aforementioned greatest non-heroine of all time, Yuji's big sister, the appointed almighty god ex-passionate brocon, Kazuki. There are few girls in the visual novel medium whose brother complexes reach intense, even obsessive levels, and Kazuki is up there as one of the top crazies. Yuji's PTSD didn't start as a hitman taking lives, arguably it was Yuji being his older sister's boy toy. There's no doubt that Kazuki loves her younger brother, but her status as an unparalleled human created a troubled family situation and an unhealthy relationship, to only then spiral out of control. The rare time when the older sibling is the parents' favorite child. Yuji's past was a snowball that layered tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy. It's a pretty depressing biography about all of his feelings of worthlessness and physical reactions with every bad thing that happens. A great case of how strained family dynamics at a young age drastically affects a child growing up. Only with that anime dramatization of how can we make his life a living hell. I'm not a fan of suffering torture porn, but luckily this scenario isn't solely depressing. His past does take an upturn for the better, all thanks to another equally dominating yet passionately caring woman. This man may be swimming in misery, but the dude is also drowning with top-class women. Asako Kusakabe is a legend. For as much as Asako is a troublesome person, both in rough behavioral attitude and stubborn self-imposed morals, she is incredibly capable with years of experience backing her. A total badass, a human weapon of national defense, having now retired with a beer and book in hand. She is living the dream. She just so happened to pick up raising a kid as a new hobby. I just love my dysfunctional, non-traditional family of two adopted mothers, one a legendary sniper maverick, the other an Italian-German workaholic, always stressed by the former, Yuji the child soldier gone through hell, and John the puppy. Thanks to Asako, Yuji slowly changes for the better, but we still see him scarred and silently carrying his PTSD. Simply Asako being in his life does not resolve him of the trauma he's endured, nor the actions he's committed in the past. I like how it's not a simple cure where everything's alright now. It's always depicted as a struggle on his part, one that requires constant hard work and effort. Both Kazuki and Asako do course corrections whenever Yuji needs it, and create situations for him to succeed, whether that be on the field or with other women. However, it's solely on him to do something about it. Yuji is in the same exact position as the Mihama girls. He's just further ahead than them, and decided to offer help to those in that same mental fog, just like how his mentor has done for him. I'm a super big fan of this narrative arc of personal self-growth, and then imparting those same life lessons to those who also need it. Everything Yuji did in his past was him laying the seeds for him to unexpectedly reap the fruit of his good deeds in Eden. If you couldn't tell, this is where the fruit metaphors are really hammered in. But before we go to the Eden of Grisaia, let's talk about the side visual novels first: Leisure, Afterglow, and Melody. Chronologically, Leisure can be read after Fruit, and Afterglow and Melody can be read after the Cocoon of Caprice scenario. Personally, Leisure you can ignore because it's a short 1-hour comedic skit featuring Michiru that really doesn't add anything new to the story or characters. Afterglow, though, is a collection of stories that dive more into the everyday lives of Yuji, Asako, and JB. Despite how unkempt their lives are, much to JB's disdain, seeing the growing affections between all of them in Yuji's healing state is nice to see. Wholesome motherly caretaking really, even if they are a bit whack. Melody, on the other hand, is showing Yuji inheriting Asako's role by protecting a rather unruly small lady. A nice action story that fills in a small hole in the Cocoon of Caprice scenario, but nothing of value will be missed if you didn't read this. All of these side stories are optional and don't require reading. It's just there if you want more Grisaia content, as short as they are. And now, let's talk about the Eden of Grisaia, in which the story becomes less of a romance psychological drama and transforms into a full action heist. Yuji helped them with their problems, now it's up to the rest of the girls to help Yuji with his. In the face of adversity, these 5 ordinary high school girls proceed to do whatever it takes to repay the favor. Yuji's quirky military habits imprinting onto the girls unexpectedly worked out in his favor, teaching Makina how to use a sniper rifle, showing Sachi how to defuse a bomb. It's so absurd what happens in here, but it's entirely believable because he made that much of an impact on them. Following the Mihama girls is just entertaining all the way through. It's very hype and I absolutely love it, both as a rousing and motivating kick-ass story and as a quick debrief on their growth and personal transformation manifested in a different way from their individual routes / after stories. To be quite honest, I don't have anything else to say about Eden without spoiling major plot points. It is the conclusion to Yuji's journey, the time to put an end to the past type shit. It's even got a title drop in it. Now, besides the main scenario, the Seed of Blanc Isle, we also have the prologue of Grisaia, a look into each of the girls' arrival to Mihama Academy, the after story, which is the very fun epilogue of the whole Grisaia story, and of course, everyone's favorite, the return of Professor Dave's masturbation station. I especially like the prologue because it is all about the girls. It's a missing part of the timeline that I felt was important to know. Yuji may have been the catalyst behind their character arcs, but this was the first time the girls comfortably let down their guard in front of others after their incidents, in front of others who can truly understand them too. It's also especially notable because the dynamic between these girls are so good that you don't even need Yuji here to make a good story about them. The Grisaia heroines together are just that good. The Grisaia trilogy I had a great fun time with, blending thrilling action and psychological drama, packaged as a harem comedy romance. All of these heroines are extremely likable in their own ways, and by the end, what I initially expected to be an I can fix some anime romance doubled down to be full of hopeful energy after experiencing adversity. In everyone's individual journey, they express positive, uplifting messages and reassuring feelings, all through the support of friends and family, only to naturally support them in turn. Even if the world is hell and have declared you rotten, all you need to do is create your own paradise in the world for you and your loved ones. Thank you for watching this very long video until the end, and if you like Grisaia, you might be interested in watching this video over here, or this one for a general visual novel recommendation. I would like to thank everyone on Patreon for supporting me in covering visual novels. You guys are fantastic, and if you'd like to be a part of that effort in supporting visual novel content, please consider subscribing. And lastly, if you're just considering the main Mihama girls, Yumiko best girl.